My first couple of weeks, I just couldn't believe I had the opportunity to do what I was doing. We all kind of dream of the day that you can take the job that you really feel like you were put on the earth to do and that you really feel is making a difference. I've had some great opportunities over the course of my career, but nothing like this.
This is Overlooked, and I'm Golda Arthur. In this podcast, we believe women's health can't wait. We're already decades behind in research. So it's always interesting for me to talk to people trying to move that needle along faster. My guest today is Nicole Sandford, the CEO of a company called Aspira Women's Health. Aspira develops diagnostic tests for gynecologic diseases like ovarian cancer. Their blood tests screen women who have masses on their ovaries, and they're working on other kinds of tests as well, including one for endometriosis. Nicole is also a cancer survivor, and she talks about how that informs her leadership of Aspira. Here's Nicole Sandford. Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much for joining us on Overlooked.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about Aspira Women's Health and what you guys do.
Sure. So we are a bioanalytical company. We offer non-invasive tests for gynecologic disease, and our currently commercially available tests are focused on helping physicians identify ovarian cancer in women with adnexal masses.
Mm-hmm. Let's unpack that a little bit more. What is an adnexal mass? I can't even say it. It's ADNEX. How do you spell it?
ADNEXAL, adnexal mass.
So what is it?
So that's a mass that's in or around the ovary.
And it can be, I'm assuming then that is like a generic term for something that could be a cyst or it could be something else.
That's right. It can be a variety of things. Ovarian cancer is relatively rare. About 20,000 women a year are diagnosed with ovarian cancer, but more than 1 million women will have a adnexal mass diagnosed. So the good news is the odds of a mass being ovarian cancer is small. The not so great news is that the things that are benign and not concerning in any way look an awful lot like the things that you should be worried about on ultrasounds, and that makes it very difficult to identify patients that have something that they need to address with surgery or with a consultation with another physician versus something that can be watched and will resolve itself.
If you told me 5 years ago that I would enjoy conversations about the ovaries as much as I do, I would have laughed in your face. But I miss my own ovaries quite a lot. So
I do as well. I do as well.
And we will talk about that as well coming up. But let's start here. Walk me through the products that you guys make.
Sure. So we offer blood tests. So very simple tests that can be drawn in a doctor's office or in a laboratory setting and sent to our lab where we will analyze biomarkers, protein biomarkers primarily, and run that with various biometric information, age, menopausal status, for example, against an advanced algorithm that has been trained to identify masses that are at a higher or lower risk for ovarian cancer.
Who are these products for? Like who is really your target audience here?
We offer the tests primarily through gynecologists, but also primary care doctors, nurse practitioners in a variety of different settings. So any woman who is diagnosed with a mass is the right patient for one of our tests. We have a variety of indications, but they were all created to help identify ovarian cancer risk in women with masses.
And I know that you are currently working on outreach to clinicians. So tell me a little bit more about the kind of outreach that you're doing.
So the primary way that we reach physicians is through our sales force, both in the terms of the field team and our inside sales team. But we also do a fair amount of outreach through publications and conferences. But we're working really hard to drive this as the new standard of care for any woman with a mass.
If I could pivot for a second to ask about your own story,
Sure.
One thing you and I have in common, weirdly, is that we've both have had an oophorectomy. Mine was quite recently. When was yours?
2021. So, about maybe 6 months or so before I became the CEO of Aspira, actually.
Right. Tell me that story, Nicole.
I mean, the outcome is the same for all of us. The story just seems to be completely different. It's a meandering story like it is for all of us. My journey really started when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016. And I took tamoxifen, as a lot of women do after breast cancer diagnosis. And it does do some strange things to your uterus. And I had that situation. So, at one point, long after my mastectomies and reconstruction, and I should mention also, I did lose my grandmother on my dad's side long before I was even born to ovarian cancer. So I do have that sort of family history, although I don't have a genetic predisposition based on the genes that we know today, right? So I'm not BRCA. I don't have sort of a known genetic linkage. But for all those reasons, I'm considered higher risk. So as I was discussing options and what I wanted to do about some of the things that I was dealing with for my uterus, they identified a mass, an adnexal mass on my ovary. And again, this is before our OvaWatch test was available. I did ask the doctor to run an OVA1 test prior to the surgery because I wanted to understand the risk that we were looking at a potential malignancy, and the risk was very low, but that was a surgical triage tool. Our new test would be used even before that decision point to say, should you even be going and removing the ovary at all, or the mass at all. My doctor did remove my ovaries at that time, and I was immediately put into surgical menopause, which has been probably the biggest surprise, and I don't mean that in a good way, of my life. Is the symptoms were so much worse than I had anticipated, and they don't seem to really get better. When does this stuff start to go away? I can't find a lot of quality research that helps to answer that question. And menopause, just as a general statement, is completely under-researched. So, it has been a real journey for me, and I feel like I'm managing the symptoms better now, but it's still very challenging.
Oh yeah. No, it's completely kicking my ass right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well
that's
said. Well said.
so I'm curious about this. How does this personal experience of yours, how does that inform your work as someone who leads a women's healthcare company? Like,
Yeah.
does it inform your
Oh, it
work?
absolutely does. I mean, that I'm in the fight primarily to help avoid the kind of situation that you and I are going through. Look, I'm never going to say, if you're at high risk and you have a mass that's high risk and our test validates that, of course you should have a surgical intervention. And if that also means removal of the ovaries, of course that makes sense in some cases. But given the low incidence of ovarian cancer, and the number of oophorectomies that are done in this country, which is about 200,000 or more. Actually, I just saw a recent study that was a much higher number, but at least 200,000 surgical interventions, so removal of ovaries in women with a 20,000 patient population for cancer. That seems to me like we're taking a lot of healthy ovaries that could stay in place. And we're learning more and more every year. We're learning that keeping your ovaries for as long as possible improves your overall long-term health as a woman, which seems obvious, but is not been an obvious conversation. So yeah, my personal experience weighs very heavily on my day-to-day oversight of the company, and sort of just drive to never give up. I mean, we're just not going to give up. This test matters a lot. And I think the encouraging part is I have two daughters in their 20s. They don't take anybody's word for anything when it comes to their health. I mean, they will
Thank
do the
God for that.
research. Right, right. And, it's not always high quality information you get if you're just relying on Dr. Google, but you can actually get a lot of really good information now about studies and new technologies and new products that just weren't available to our mothers and to some extent to us. So I'm encouraged to see women in their 20s and 30s who are, asking more questions before they just kind of go in and have a surgery that's going to change the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And I do feel there is this heavily like this dependence or this skew towards surgery as
Hmm.
the solution for everything, isn't there?
There absolutely is. And what's interesting too is in our country, I think in the United States, surgical intervention is more heavily favored than in other parts of the world, but that doesn't seem to be resulting in earlier diagnosis of ovarian cancer. In fact, World Ovarian Cancer Coalition, where they published a study and survey that showed that we were the slowest among the developed countries in the survey, from the time a woman experiences symptoms to the time that they were diagnosed with ovarian cancer was more than 20 weeks. It's the longest of any developed country. So you could say that our default to surgical diagnosis doesn't appear to actually help us to find ovarian cancer faster. Now we do a pretty good job treating women once they're diagnosed, but we need to do better in that time from symptoms, which by the way, most women do experience symptoms, which is a real fallacy around ovarian cancer. So another message to people listening is listen to your bodies. And if something doesn't feel right, keep asking questions until you get an answer as to what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That keep asking questions bit is so important, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of what we're trying to do is insert more objective data into the discussion and get away from making decisions about your body based just on fear.
Yeah.
We can find ovarian cancer sooner and we can triage the right people to the right doctors at the right time if we open our minds to new technology. And look, in fairness to doctors, because I'm certainly not here to bash doctors by any stretch of the imagination, there was very little innovation that happened in diagnosis of gynecologic cancers overall, but in ovarian cancer in particular, in the last probably 30 or 40 years. I mean, CA-125 is a biomarker that a lot of doctors use, but they're using it in a lot of cases off label. It really was only recommended and only labeled for use as recurrence monitoring tool. And a lot of women don't know that, but you'll have an elevated or an abnormal, I guess, result for CA-125 for a lot of reasons that absolutely have nothing to do with ovarian cancer. And so it leads you down a path. But that was all that was available. But now I think we all owe it to patients and to each other and to our daughters, frankly, to keep the minds more open than in the past.
I'm very curious about this broadly across the board. Everyone that I talk to has thoughts on this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. I want to do an episode at some point called How to Talk So Your Doctor Listens, which is a provocative title because obviously it doesn't matter how you talk, your doctor should be listening to you regardless.
Right.
But, the idea is to provoke a discussion on it. And if I had to put that to you as a prompt, how to talk to your doctor listens, so your doctor listens, what would you say? What should women do with those 10 minutes that they're given in the doctor's offices?
Geez, that's a tough one. I will say that I knew something was wrong before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had lobular cancer, which is not really easy to find on your own. It doesn't present as a lump that you feel in the shower or anything like that. It's more like a string. So it wasn't that I felt something, but something just felt off. And I went to my doctor and, my blood work showed, well, your vitamins D levels very, very low. And I said, well, I'm tired, but that's not it. Like there's something else there. And he to his credit did listen. This was just my GP. This wasn't my gynecologist. And he said, hey, if you haven't been back to your gynecologist in a while, maybe you better pop over there and get your annual physical there. So I did go maybe a month later. But I just had the confidence, and I've always been a little bit of a rabble rouser anyway. So it's not a big stretch for me to just be like, yeah, I don't think that's it. I don't doubt that my vitamin D is low, but something else is wrong, right? And so, I do think it's just a matter of following your gut and understanding your body. And it's important, I think, when you're first meeting with a doctor to get a good sense that it's somebody that'll listen to you. So it's not this is a good doctor, that's a bad doctor, or you're a good patient or a bad patient. It's like any other relationship. If it doesn't feel like you're comfortable opening up and exploring what you're talking about until you're satisfied, then you probably need to try someone else. And you have that little voice in your head for a reason. And if that little voice is telling you, I'm not done asking questions and I'm feeling dismissed, then just find somebody else.
Yeah. Mm. Nicole, you seem like a real fighter, if I
Yeah.
can be candid.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. What's the dream here? What's the dream scenario for the products that Aspira Health has?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I need women to go out and buy stocks in companies like Aspira. We need to take responsibility for funding this work. I should tell you that the very first interaction I had with Aspira, I bought stock. I took some money I had in my IRA and I called my broker and said, put X dollars, which was a pretty significant number for me, but by no stretch of the imagination did it make me a large investor. But I said, I believe in this company, I believe in this test, and I want to invest. If every woman who has an IRA somewhere did that, not just for Aspira, but there are other women's health companies that really we need to feel a heck of a lot more responsible for the capital infusions that are necessary for these tests and these technologies. So let me first say that's the dream, that I look around in a room full of my shareholders and see more women, because there's very few, and that's kind of sad, frankly. That's number one. But I think that the technology that we've developed with, and our partners in the development are very prestigious academic and research institutions like Dana-Farber and Johns Hopkins University. These are really advanced, high-performing tests that we have here. We can use that same technology in other gynecologic diseases. I frankly would love to see. Now we're working on a test for endometriosis. We've completed the design of the very first blood test that identifies endometriosis, primarily endometriomas. But there's no reason to believe that a similar approach wouldn't work for other gynecologic diseases. And we need that. We need companies like Aspira to continue to be able to innovate on gynecologic disease diagnostics, because it's been woefully underinvested in for many, many years, as you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Overlooked.
Indeed, so many interpretations of that, and overlooked is a mild way to put it. In so many ways. So, what is the challenge? Like among the challenges that you have spread out in front of you, keeping you from those dream scenarios, what's the biggest one?
I just think operating in the United States in the healthcare system, the way it's designed right now, is really impossible for most companies that are innovating. It's not just an Aspira problem. It's a system-wide problem. I was very excited to see the research allocations that President Biden approved earlier this year. That's exciting, but we have rock solid research. So that's not really the problem for a company like mine, right? We just need to recognize that, we need better incentives for insurance companies and doctors to innovate and to take advantage of the new technology. So that's probably the thing that keeps me up at night. We could do everything right, but if the system is broken to a point where it can't support a company like ours, women are going to suffer. We can't really, as women, we can't afford to wait anymore. We must get more active in fixing it once and for all.
Right. In fact, that's the tagline of the podcast. Women's health can't wait.
That's right. Absolutely. That's true.